Get ready. Garmin Stone Cold Fishing starts right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to Garmin Stone Cold Fishing Live. I got to admit, I just got out of the fish house, maybe a half hour ago, raced into the office. I was having so much fun. I got to show you some pictures here in just a little bit from what we were watching out of the water. But I hope you guys are enjoying some great fishing success. And I tell you what, we've got a show tonight that I believe you're going to remember maybe for the rest of your fishing career, because we got some information that's going to really help you understand what's going on through the ice, maybe in fish movement, fish activity levels, and things. So stick around. It's going to be an awesome show. I do have some bad news leading in tonight. Danny Thompson's not going to be able to join us tonight, but he will be here next week. And so Tom Kimos is going to step up and be our co-host tonight. So we'll bring him in just a bit. Should be kind of fun. We do have a lot to cover tonight. We're going to talk about water temps beneath the ice. And one of the questions I'm going to ask everybody, I'm going to ask you to write these down in the comments section, so I'll hold it to you later. But what do you think the water temps are beneath the surface of the ice? So send them through on your comments. We're going to go through things with Pat Smith in a couple segments from now. It should be kind of fun. And then we're going to go into really deep into fishing lines with pro Kristine Fischer, who was here tonight. We're going to talk about when do you go to mono, when do you go to fluoro, when do you go to braid or fuse lines like fire line. That's an important topic because it's the basics, but if you pick the wrong line, it can really impact success. So that should be fun. Pete Dewey, glad you're checking in tonight. James, glad you're on board as well, and everybody else that's tuning in. Before we go any further, I want to bring in Troy Simonton, LiveScope expert. Here's a guy who helped develop Garmin Panoptics and LiveScope, and he's really a true expert, and better than just being an engineer at Garmin. This guy loves to fish, and he brings back all the time what he likes to what he sees in the field and tweaks things. But hey, Troy, join us if you can. How are you tonight?
Hey, Steve, going really good tonight.
Yeah. So the last 2 weeks, you've had close to 800 questions from viewers, and I hope you get 1,600 tonight, because I want to keep you busy here. Yeah, I know you've been working out in the garage all day, but I have a couple of questions for you. And anybody that's watching tonight, if you have questions on LiveScope or Panoptics, there's not a question you can't ask. You can ask Troy that you're going to really stump him. So if you really want to get into detail of getting max performance on your LiveScope or your Panoptics or any Garmin products, reach out to Troy through the comments section tonight, and he'll be able to answer you. I do have a question for you, Troy. If someone's looking to upgrade their battery in their LiveScope through their ice bundle, what would you recommend in terms of an amp hour battery, whether it's lead acid or, drawing a blank right now on lithium?
Lithium, yeah. Well, I would definitely steer somebody towards one of the lithium batteries. The Garmin battery, it's a 16.5 amp hour battery. It gives you somewhere between 10 and 14 hours of runtime. Just depends on the temperature and also what your backlight setting is on the unit. But there's a lot of players out there. I use some of the ones out there as well. They're all good. They all work. I would go at least 15 amp hour, maybe a 20 amp hour. That's a real common size as well. So several folks making and selling those. So
I like the lithium as well. I mean, you've got to take care of them, but at the same time, they're so much lighter and provide performance. And so there's a number of great ones out there. But the new ice bundle comes with what? It's a 16 amp hour battery that comes with there. Okay, the other question we talked about, this came out of a conversation with Tom Kimos on Midwinter Walleyes. He talked about transition zones between hard and soft bottom. And I saw a number of questions that popped up in the last show. Does LiveScope show the transitions or the hard bottom or soft bottom? What should people look for on the LiveScope?
Well, it's yes, it does. And so it's similar to regular sonar in though that you need to learn what you're looking at. And what I tell folks is to go to a rocky bank and it transitions to sand or mud, just even out of your boat sometime. Whatever, go somewhere where you know what it is. Take a look at it, forward mode, 15 to 20 foot of water, put it in like a, 30 to 50 foot range. A rocky bank is going to look, kind of a cottage cheese look. You'll see the, individual rocks and a lot stronger return. And so you see, a brighter return than when you transition to sand or to the mud bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I was on Mille Lacs the other day, and the rocks, very clear on that. And when you get off in some of the mud flats, you can actually see it's a much softer return. You're not getting the bright colors and things coming through. But hey, I don't want to hold you off. If you guys have questions tonight, send them through the comment section for Troy. He'll answer them personally. And the added benefit of writing a comment is you're going to be eligible then to win our prizes tonight, including we're going to be giving a LiveScope here away, a LiveScope ice bundle. If you look right behind me, it's this one right here. It's got the new lithium battery and everything. And we're going to pick a winner from everybody that's participating in the show. We've got 2 more shows left. We're going to be giving this away at the end of the final show at the end of the month. But everybody that participates tonight is eligible to win that. So we're going to be giving that away. And then last week, I want to congratulate Melissa Wendt. Hey, Troy, we'll talk to you later. Thanks for coming in. And everybody, reach out to Troy tonight. I want to keep him busy. I want to thank and congratulate Melissa Wendt, who won last week. She won a Garmin Striker 4 ice bundle. Melissa, if you're listening tonight, that was shipped earlier this week, and should be arriving on your doorstep here shortly. Tonight, we're giving away a Razor Scout. It's a 5-inch version of the Razor Scout. Obviously, it runs on with your drill system. I tell you what, it's called a Scout for a couple of reasons. It's super lightweight. It's easy to use. And I had a ball with mine this week. I used it to really kind of position the fish house and stuff like that. So again, if you want to win the Razor Scout tonight, just comment or like or share the program. And at the end of the show tonight, we are going to be giving away that Razor Scout to a lucky winner. We'll get that shipped off. And again, don't forget that we're going to give away that Garmin LiveScope at the end. Hey, I mentioned the Razor Scout earlier this week. I went out with a perspective mount on my LiveScope, and I was searching out some weed bed areas, trying to find schools of crappie, sunfish, and maybe run into a bass or 2 or even a big pike. And I wanted to share something that's pretty cool. So in my fish house, I have a house that I own with a buddy of mine. It's just a pretty basic wheelhouse, but we put in a 50-inch TV screen. And I got to show you some of the images that came out of it. So I've run in, I'm going to show you what we've got. So I've got a HD7i AquaView, and on the back of it is an HDMI cable that runs up to the television, which we run off of a generator. And I got to show you some of the images that we saw this week on the screen. So this was earlier in the week. It was right in the middle of that nasty cold front we had running through Minnesota. You could see that the fish were not active. They were all tight to the bottom and not active. And then we had, this was just a little bit ago. These came rolling through. These fish were much more active. We put a lot of them on the ice, which was a ton of fun on that. So it was pretty cool. So I used the LiveScope and I used the AquaView to study fish behavior underwater, and it's absolutely pretty cool. But I do want to share a video of something that happened earlier this week as well. So Caillou, see if he eats it. Is he gonna eat it? I can't tell, but he's a big one. This is on a very heavily pressured lake, and have a double-digit fish roll up and look at fish we're dealing with. It was kind of hilarious. Hey, let's bring in Tom Kimos right now. I want to go through some viewer questions that we had last week, and do a couple more to kind of run through things. Tom, how you been this week?
Good. How about you?
I've been good. You know, I have to admit, this weather's been baffling. We had 21 below zero. Then yesterday was 27, and I look down at these poor fish and I wonder if they know what's going on, because it's just so hard to get a read on them. Their body language under the ice right now has not been positive, but it's been fun studying fish behavior on the camera. But how about yourself? You been on the ice much?
Yeah, it's been kind of wild this week with the cold weather coming through, and we've just had a ton of wind, which makes running around scouting pretty difficult. But this coming, we've got the right conditions setting up for a real good, Tuesday through Thursday. Looks like we're going to have some stable, warm weather, so I'm pretty excited for that.
That pike was funny this week because I was trying to figure out why all the panfish just scattered, and then he rolled in. And for a second there, I thought he was actually going to bite, which was kind of fun. Hey, let's take some viewer questions from the last couple of weeks, and anybody that's out there, if you got questions tonight, send them through, and Tom and I will get to as many as we can going forward. So, Kai, excuse me. So Matt Dewey had asked you a question. He says, do you change your game plan when fishing higher pressure lakes, or stick with what you know? And that's an interesting question, Tom, because I think the higher pressure lake, one of the keys is to actually get away from the crowds. But how do you approach the areas with higher pressure?
Yeah, it's interesting because I live in an area where, southeastern Wisconsin, fish the Madison chain a lot, heavily pressured waters. And, a lot of times in the winter, the fish want to be where they want to be. And you have to adjust your techniques more than where the fish are at. So a lot of times in the higher pressure lakes, you're going to want to downsize. You're going to want to pay more attention to the spot on the spot, whether it's a transition, looking for trails through the weeds. The fish will hold tighter to specific pieces of structure, once again, whether it's a bottom transition or a certain type of grass. But you've got to, fine tune your location and your technique. I'll go down to super light line, tiny jigs, microplastics to trick these fish into biting, because not only are they dealing with the pressure on the ice, but also they're seeing a lot of presentations and holes getting popped in and whatnot. Now, lakes that don't have the super heavy fishing pressure, when there's just areas of the lake that are getting worked over, I will try to avoid that. But once again, you need to have the right setups for those fish to be there, especially as winter progresses. Those fish are going to be, they're based more on forage and seasonal migration than whether there's pressure on the lake or not. So
yeah, and I think one thing too is if you study areas that have been traditionally producing fish, especially just look at a Lakeview map is with so much detail, and try to break down why are those fish in these areas, and then look at your map and really study the map and go, hey, here's a spot that looks very similar in nature, but it's not getting the type of pressure that other spots are, and that might be a way to move on that. Kai, what's the next question? So what's your best recommendation for hole placement with LiveScope? But that's a pretty easy question. When you look at a LiveScope transducer, it's not a round transducer down there. It's actually an oblong transducer, and it's sending signals out on both sides of it. So what I'd like to do is drill the hole for the LiveScope in dead center between the holes, and then I'll separate the other two holes by 2-3 feet, maybe 4 feet, depending on how much room you've got. Then you got good separation, but you also got good viewing on it. So that's a great question, Rachel. So thanks for sending that one in. The next
let me expand, Steve, on that just a little bit. One other thing that's important when you're having a multi-hole setup is you do want to pay attention to the current, because you want to be set up so that you're taking advantage of the area underneath you, including the area that LiveScope is covering. So, in certain Great Lakes situations, you're going to have incoming or outgoing current. You do want to pay a little bit of attention to that as far as your hole placement. But basically, what you described is 9 times out of 10 the way that I would do it. So.
the first time I ever fished a river situation in winter, we were in about 30 feet of water. And I was like, wait a minute, the line's going like this. So that is fun. Rachel, thanks for sending that in. Anybody, Troy, what's our next one? This is a Mary Danielson asked, what's your thoughts on inline reels? And Tom, I don't know about you, but I grew up fishing a hockey stick that was broken off and it shoved something in or made a rod and reel out of it. Then we started taping spinning reels on, in some cases bait casters. And we've evolved now to almost everybody's using reels on the rods, and except for some of the tournament fishermen. But the advantage of an inline reel is that instead of taking your line and wrapping it around the spool and creating, in some cases, line twist or a very tight spool, you've got the line can actually start kinking after a while. The inline reels wrap the line in a circular motion, which is the direction of the line is coming. So you prevent a lot of line twist, which is important, especially when you're fishing bluegills. I've seen it 1,000 times, and Tom, I know you've seen the same thing, where that lure will actually spin underwater, and those bluegills will sit there and wait for it to stop spinning. A lot of times it'll spin, then it'll stop, and then it'll spin the other way, and then it'll stop, and it'll spin back the other way, and the fish tend to leave at that thing. And one of the big advantages of inline reels is that it helps you avoid line spin. Tom, are you using any of the inline at all yourself, or are you a mostly spinning guy?
I'm primarily a spinning guy in deeper water. I'm talking like, water deeper than 8 to 10 foot. I use inline reels for my shallow setups, but I still prefer the spinning reels just for speed, getting baits back, flaring them back down there. But there's definitely pros and cons to both of them, but I still prefer my spinning reels, especially when it's cold out.
Yeah, they are a little bit more work, but they do work. Hey, Kurt Morgan asked a question with LiveScope. How's the interference with other sonars? Tom, why don't you go ahead and reach this one yourself?
Yeah, you know what? You really don't experience that like we used to experience when we'd be sitting down next to a Garmin, next to a Vexilar, next to a Lowrance, in the old days. Now with the LiveScope, you really don't see too much of that. Especially anything that's going to hamper your experience with it. Whereas you used to have situations with 2D where you could sit down next to a guy and completely blow his sonar out with your signal. So I haven't really seen that. And nowadays, even with our 2D, we can adjust our sonar frequencies, which is very nice too when you are fishing in close confines.
Yeah, I haven't really had any issues with interference on the LiveScope. So just a heads up on that. So and then Kurt asked another question: how far in front can you see with a LiveScope? I mean, I've looked out easily to 100, 120 feet in some of the lakes that have some of the clearer bodies of water with less, sediment or any type of floating matter in the water. I typically don't go any further than that, because if I can't find it, I'll typically cut another hole and start your search. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I'm using it in perspective mode, I'm pretty confident out to 140 or 160. But once again, you hit on it. Water clarity is going to play a factor into that. Also, we underestimate how many different critters there are in some of these lakes also, and you can run into situations in lakes that have a lot of bugs and whatnot in the water where that's also going to hamper your range with them. But I'm 120 all day long, but I'm confident further out than that. So I know when we're talking about bigger targets, 160, 180, no problem.
Awesome.
Absolutely no problem with that. And I'm using that in waters up to 60 foot.
So Tom, one of the questions that we had that followed up your section on midwinter walleyes on mapping was talking about working deep humps. And here's a body of water that's in northern Minnesota. It's got a 27-foot hump on one side, a 29-footer on the other, with deep water all around it. If you had to select one or the other hump, and which one would you fish to start with, and which one would you and how would you approach that particular hump?
Well, I like the large on the one that would be on the west side of the map, or the left as you're looking at it, the one that tops off in 27 foot. I like that big flat that's on top of it, but I also like you know the fact that there are two areas where the contour lines are very tight, so that gives those fish an area to move up real fast. Both of those humps are nice due to the fact that there's the deep slot running through them, but I think I would lean more towards the one on the left, you know, and that's just just from looking at it right now, I like that fact that there's a big feeding shelf on top of it for sure.
You know what I would do in this situation is you would fish to 27, I'd fish to 29, and then we'd talk on the phone and see who's doing better.
Yeah,
you know, because you just don't know
true.
some of these things. They tend to move in and out on these humps, and one might be hot one night and the other might be hot the next night. But they're definitely a fun place to fish right at dark, which is really a lot of fun.
If I had to bet on either one of those humps, though, on areas to set up, it would always, I prefer those areas that have a steeper break or with tighter contour lines for sure, though.
That's awesome. Hey, we've got time for one other question before we bring Kristine Fischer in. Do you upside or downsize based on water clarity? I'm going to start. I think I'm going to start on this one. I fish a lot of lakes that are, turbid in nature, and I think it's a color thing more than and a sound thing more than upsize or downsize. I mean, I'm not afraid to fish smaller or afraid to fish large. I may fish larger on some of this stuff, but it's more of a color to me, some of the brighter colors, and then some of the other stuff in terms of the size or the rattles. But what are your thoughts?
Well, if we're talking, bluegills or perch or something like that, in the little bit dirtier water, I will go up a size or two. Obviously color is the most important deal, but that size can be important also just for calling fish in. I fish a lot of flowages and river systems that do have, pretty dingy water. Now, on the flip side, in clear situations, a lot of times you can get away with smaller baits. When in the situation of walleyes, it's always going to be trying to match the hatch deal, and then I'm going to adjust for water clarity with color, just like what you said, Steve.
Awesome. Hey, we're going to move on. Now I want to bring in Kristine Fischer. Kristine's a nationally known angler who recently appeared on Lake Commandos. We had a chance to fish a lake in Wisconsin for big smallmouth, and I really enjoyed hanging out with Kristine. She's been winning tournaments across the country. In fact, she just won a national kayak championship. She grew up in Nebraska and is really a passionate ice fisherman. Kristine, how you been tonight?
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
Good. Are you back home, or where are you at right now?
Well, now I'm in Georgia, getting my stuff all packed up to hit the road, get down to Florida with everybody else, and start kicking off that 2022 tournament season.
So how many tournaments are you fishing a year?
This year I think I've got about, usually every year it's anywhere from 20 to 25. I've got like 25, 27 on the book for this year, but I'll probably end up doing probably 24, 25.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about the big event you just won. What was it, about a month and a half ago now?
Yeah, it was the Hobie Tournament of Champions. The top 50 in our sport qualified for this event, and just to qualify as a feat in itself. And down in Lake Eufaula in Alabama, it was a 3-day event, and I ended up having enough to take it home. So that was definitely my biggest career win, and a huge thing for me. I'm just still kind of just in disbelief over all of it, but really great experience.
I'm not in disbelief. I'm surprised. I'm not surprised at all. Hey, Tom, can you imagine fishing 20, 25 tournaments a year? I don't know if I can take that.
It's a big schedule for sure.
Yeah.
It is.
Hey, Kristine, you're a very passionate ice fisherman, and I want to talk a little bit about line choice in that I have some personal opinions on things, but tell me, when do you fish mono and when do you like to go to braid or fuse lines or fluorocarbon. So let's start with a little bit with mono. When do you turn to mono, or do you use mono?
Yeah, I think, well, when we're talking, I do something slightly different with ice fishing as opposed to open water. But I think the general rule still applies. And when you're looking at line, I look at the characteristics of the line and that I apply that to how I'm fishing. With mono, obviously, it floats. So when you're fishing like little micro jigs in real deep water, like anything over 25, 30 foot, sometimes braid or mono might not be your best option there. But mono also has a little stretch. So I've always liked mono with like more live bait options to let those fish kind of take that in and give that extra stretch in the line. That's always been kind of a general rule of thumb. That's how I grew up fishing, using a lot of monofilament for fishing walleye with live leeches and crawlers and stuff like that. It was monofilament was kind of, at least when I was a kid and growing up, that was kind of a big deal. It's also a visibility thing as well. I think it's a little bit more manageable than fluorocarbon. I'm a big fluorocarbon believer. I've always liked fluoro, but with ice fishing, sometimes it doesn't make as much sense with those smaller diameter spools and stuff. But yeah, anytime I'm using live bait, or I guess when it makes sense with ice fishing applications is when I'll do that. But I dabble with all three of the main lines with that.
Tom, you're a fan of mono especially in the shallower water, correct? Is there other times you go to mono?
I use mono a lot for walleye jigging. Matter of fact, I primarily use mono, and one of the big pieces of that is because it does float, I actually feel like it helps the baits fall a little bit slower, especially in glide baits. I really like the way mono reacts with it. I'll use fluorocarbon in some of the situations where we've got heavier pressured fish.
Clear water,
just to take advantage of that stealthier approach. And there are some situations in shallow water too, where that little bit of extra abrasion resistance can come in handy when you got the bluegills doing the death spiral around the holes in shallow water. So primarily, I'm going to use fluoro in real shallow, and then anything else that I have a spinning reel involved in, I'm going to have mono on.
Okay, it's funny. I neither of you really have talked much about fuse lines like Fireline or braid. I used to fish them a ton. I still like them for big fish, especially when I want the strength for lake trout, giant lake trout, or sturgeon, or really deep water fishing. I like the sensitivity because it has no stretch. But I'm finding that in a lot of those situations, fluoro makes sense as well because it does sink, like Kristine mentioned, and it stretches, but it stretches slower than mono, so you get more sensitivity, which I think is really awesome. Kristine, in terms of the invisibility, fluorocarbon has something called a refractive index, which bends light the same as water, which is why it's virtually invisible. How big of a factor do you see that as being, a great attribute for line choice?
Well, like Tom said, I'm gonna kind of play on what he said. It's all situational. I think there's some circumstances where it makes a huge difference, but just the same as maybe going down in line size can make a big difference. Going from like a 4 pound to a 2 pound, or 4 to even 3 can make a big difference in a really fickle bite. And I think that's a pretty some people have different opinions on that, but I know there's certain situations with real clear water with fish that are experiencing a ton of pressure where it would make more sense to go with fluorocarbon with some of that stuff, especially when you're not fishing reaction baits through the ice, and you want to get those fish need a little extra time to look at it. I think that's when you need to consider looking at a fluorocarbon line as opposed to monofilament or braid, obviously.
Are you a fan of clear lines, or are you comfortable using any type of a tinted line?
I've dabbled a little bit in the tinted line with open water stuff. I like, again, that's pretty situational, but when I like having the higher vis lines to detect certain bites. But with the ice stuff, with fluorocarbon, I stick pretty much to clear lines. with that. I haven't really done a ton with the tinted. I know there's a lot of people that live and breathe by it, but what are your thoughts on that?
I was going to check with Tom on that first, because I got a funny story about tinted lines.
Yeah, I'm a through the ice. I like to be as low profile as I can be, and I stick with primarily clear lines. You know, they're even on setups where I'm using a braided line through the ice, I'll go with a low vis line. You know, flip side is open water. I use high vis quite a bit. Anytime I can get away with it, I'll use high vis. But through the ice, I like the clear lines for sure.
I've played with some of the tinted lines. I got a funny story. Years back, we were taping an episode of what was it, North American Fisherman. And we were doing a shoot out of southern Wisconsin for salmon. And I mic'd up the captain, and I ran back to the truck to grab some gear, and the cameraman started laughing. And I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "You got to hear the captain. He was screaming because I brought a bunch of reels loaded with chartreuse colored line because it'd make it easier for the cameras to follow it." And he said that blankety blank Panaz is screwing up the shoot and all that stuff. And we go out there. We had 3 on one side, 3 on the other with clear, and 3 with the colored. And first one that went off was the chartreuse line. The second one that went off was chartreuse line. And pretty soon I started razzing him. He didn't know I had heard of what he said, and kept saying, "Well, this chartreuse line must be something to it. I think the fish like it." So with a ball. Hey, Kristine, I know you got to prepare for a tournament. You're heading on the road. Thank you for coming in tonight. And we'll be following you this season. So it's what is your if somebody wants to follow you on Facebook and Instagram, how can they follow you?
Yeah, Facebook, I think it's just Kristine Fischer. Instagram's Midwest Fisher Gal, and then I put all my tournament recaps up on my YouTube, which is Kristine Fischer as well. So
yeah, everybody, this woman knows how to fish. You'll have a fun follower this year. Thanks for coming in. We'll talk to you soon. We did shoot at Lake Commandos up on a lake up by Hayward last fall, and it was fun. She truly gets excited when she gets hooks into big fish. Hey, Kai, have we got anybody guessing what water temps were under the ice? I haven't seen any. Have you sent those through at all? Tom, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think that the 40 and below? There's a good one. Guess 40s. Lee Kimball. Tom, what are your thoughts on the ice? Water temp under the ice.
Yeah, I think typically they range from the low 40s to mid 30s. But it definitely, I'm not going to steal Pat's thunder, but it definitely makes a difference. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I want to bring in Pat Smith. I've known Pat for many, many years. We actually met on the lake. He's one of these guys that has had a huge impact on ice fishing across the upper Midwest. He loves walleyes, but I think if you punch him down, his favorite is catching giant bluegills. And Pat, why don't you join us?
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you, man.
Nice to meet you.
How are you?
Good.
So, Pat, I have to admit, one of the questions that really kind of surprised me is when you think about it, ice, you would think that the water temp beneath the ice would be, let me guess, 32 to 33 degrees. It should be close to freezing, but it's really not. And you were one of the pioneers in terms of looking at water temperatures. You fish a lot of shallow water walleyes. Kind of take us through what happens with temperatures. We just got through a major cold front in Minnesota where we had 21 below here and as low as 40 below up in northern Minnesota. Talk a little bit about how air temperatures affect water temperatures in the winter, and how does that affect the fish themselves?
Well, it was actually back early mid 90s when we really started playing with water temp. My buddy JDK John Kent, school teacher up in Ashby, we did a lot of work in super shallow water for walleyes. Like right away in the fall with the Squeak Cheek Shuffle article we did is walking out on little or no ice. Won't do that today, but we would see the fish with our eyes. I mean, it was double gin clear water, 6 feet. It was like looking at your feet on the floor. And the fish would come up and they were very laxadavid. Their pecs weren't doing much. Would they eat? Yeah, if you cut off the tail of a dead stick minnow, they'd come in and fiddle around with it for a while and finally eat it. And the first day I dropped the depthometer down, it was one of those years where it took a long time to get ice. Turnover seemed to take longer than it should have. And that's what really triggered me was in these shallows, we were dropping down. It was 32, 33 degrees, 33, 34 degrees out to 18 feet. And the fish were still very, very, very lethargic. Well, Minnetonka was the first in that lake. It's like Okoboji. It's a very good learning lake. One of the late turnovers, and the big thing with turnover people have to understand is that warm water sinks, and that's where our muskie fishing becomes so good when you hit that, 54 tulipy spawn, that warmer water is getting in deeper and deeper and deeper water. The reason we really quit talking about it, Steve, was we're catching walleyes out in 45, 50 feet of water, and we're finding water temps anywhere from 38 to 44 degrees.
At the bottom in deep water.
Yep. And the problem that I have with it is that in the state of Minnesota, if your first fish is a 21-inch walleye, you're done. Because every fish that you bring up from that depth is dead.
Yeah.
So that's a big reason that we didn't really publicize this, because it happened. And I mean, I can name off 15 lakes right now that I would not have issues going and drilling a hole in 42 to 46 feet of water instead of 18 to 21 feet of water and catching a lot more, especially walleyes. Big bluegills, we found those in the same places.
So Pat, talk a little bit about, when you have a cool front or a cold front coming through that maybe lasts 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and it's getting down to that 10, 15, 20 below, how does that affect the water temperatures in those low, the shallower to mid ranges versus say deeper water?
Okay. My humble opinion, I think it's the pressure on top of the ice. When we get these severe cold weather days, that there's so much pressure on the ice that the fish get squeezed. The UPL today, at Matt Johnson's deal, great ice fishing tournament. They broke, 14 panfish weighed 13.8 was winning weight. Multiple bluegills over a pound, pushing to I think they had 3 that actually broke a pound. They broke the record there. Multiple crappies over a pound. The big thing was it wasn't a ballistic bite. Okay, meaning there weren't multiple fish caught, but the fish they caught when they worked at it, a lot of those fish were hanging out and coming in time and time again until they finally caught them. The bluegills they caught were all on downsized stuff, like 3 mil, single maggot, small plastic. The crappies seemed to come on a little bit bigger stuff, but you got to slow down. And I don't think that the blow, once you get, I think turnover has more to do with where the water is than our sub-below temperatures.
Do you?
Especially now, this year, ottertail. Dave Gens went out to New York because there was 15 inches ice and 2 feet of snow. And then now we're talking slush and stuff like that. That, I think the weight on the ice is going to control, and I got to say this right, control more of a factor of the fish's attitude right now than the temperature. I think the temperatures in the depths that they're set up with right now will stay the same until we really start getting a good melt and get rid of some of the snow.
You mentioned that the warm water, it'll actually sink and the cool water will move up. which is a good thing, because if cool water didn't float, we wouldn't have lakes that we could drive across. We wouldn't have anything.
Exactly.
But you were mentioned in an In-Fisherman article, I think it was 2004, 2008, something like that. And they ran a graphic that I want to show right now. And I thought it was interesting. They called it the invisible structure. If you had warm temperatures over a period of days, you'd have warmer temperatures at mid depths and far down, but you'd have that cool water near the surface. And then on a really cold days, you'd have that cold water would move deeper and deeper. You still see that sort of thing. I have to admit, I didn't really start looking at water temps until that article came out and saw your quotes in there. But two, AquaView has the temperatures at the different depths. Some of the cameras do, which is really awesome. But are you playing the temperature game much anymore?
I don't hate them like I used to. Okay. The camera thing, I still run a small camera, the little pocket sized camera. I really like the old AquaView that was the flip up that had the big cord winder on it. In today's world, they do have the reels that you can pick up the cord. The depthometer wasn't super accurate, but I could put it on a Snoopy rod. It was out of the way, plunk it in, sink it, and reel it back up. It all boils back to speed and effectiveness. Most of the cameras, you're not going to put down 35, 40 feet of cord unless you have a reel to reel it back up with.
Yeah.
And in today's world, you have that option, and way more accurate than the depthometer.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you can get the temperature reading right on the screen as you're dropping down, and
exactly right.
Measure that.
And you're going to find, in my world, Steve, my world's out depth, speed, color. And I don't care if we're musky fishing or fishing bluegills. They all want it at a certain depth. They all want it at a certain cadence, rhythm, or speed. And, color, I will talk about watercolor. And there are some, don't get me wrong, there are, black and orange for muskies. I get it. There are some colors you can write in stone. But I think if you put it at the right depth, move it at the right cadence or speed, I don't care if it's purple with pink polka dots. If you do it right, they're going to eat it.
Pat, before I let you go, I'm going to blindside you with a question. You ventured on thin ice this year to save your dog, and you went through. Can you kind of tell everybody what the experience was like, and if you had any tips for someone if they're in that position where they're in the water? How did you get out?
I'm 62 years old. The Thursday after Thanksgiving, I saw the bottom of the ice for the fourth time in my life. The last time I saw it, it was over deep water. I was perch fishing on Mille Lacs. It's a beaver pond. There were more beavers in there this year than there were last year. I made a really bad shot on a bird. I knew it was dead. I got to at least try to retrieve it. Brought the dog out, the puppy, she's rocking it, but had a pretty good mark on it. I'm out 100 and some yards out on this slough. There's a creek that runs through it, slough on both sides. She finds the bird, brings it out, and the ice is making a lot of noise. And I can get on it and pretty safe. She gives me the bird, and I'm fiddling around. I stuffed the bird, and I forgot to reload the gun. I loaded the gun, and my vibrator, I run the Garmin dog collar, which is unbelievably cool. The beeper went off, told me she was on point. She's 50 yards away from me, not moving. So I wander over to where she was, and she was on the backside of a muskrat feed bed, and she was trying to get out, and you know me, I was yelling at her and screaming, and I was being mean. She laid her head on the ice. I knew she was done. walked over and I got a path on to where I could get her. I unloaded the gun and I broke the ice out to where she was so I could at least get her back to the feed bed. I got her on the feed bed. There was a lot of water that came up onto the ice. I got her off, threw her in the direction I wanted her to go, told her back, got her to sit and stay. I took 2 steps off that feed bed where I came on and I went down like a bobber. I mean, it was terrible.
How deep was the water?
It was on the surface. It was 8 feet of water.
So, Pat, for others here, if they ever find themselves in that situation, how did you get out? I mean, I've been in the water too. One on design, one not on design. And if you're in the water, you really have no idea how horrible it is when there's nothing to grab.
Well,
So how'd you get out?
I held the gun, which was great. I started banging on the ice to try to break it, because if I could move about another 3 feet, I could get up and get a hold of some cattails. And I was in the water, I mean, I'm going to say 3 minutes before I knew now I'm getting in trouble, because, my feet started going numb. I could feel my limbs getting numb. I tried going down and pushing off the bottom actually twice, and I wasn't doing enough. So what I did, and when I went down and I finally hit some sort of solid bottom, and I held my hands up, and I can reach 7 feet, and it was taller than I was. I compressed all my air, Steve. I went all the way down to the bottom as hard as I could, pushed down, blew out all my air, squatted on the bottom, and gave the best push that I could get to come up and onto the ice. And I got up just far enough that my big fat belly got up, and then I started kicking with my back feet, and I could roll out, and then I got a hold of a cattail.
That's amazing.
No, it was stupid. You got to try, but no,
understand why you went after your dog. I mean, you're saving your dog's life, but I tell you what, I won't venture onto an ice anymore after going through myself without spikes.
Well, I did make up a rope with the throwing dummy.
Yeah.
Where now she goes in and hooked it onto the vest, throw it out. She'll grab onto it. She'd get that, and then I could pull her out. So
yeah.
But she was far enough down on the swamp. I mean, it was an 80-acre piece, and I'm in the very northeast corner, and I got to get over to the southeast corner where my vehicle's parked. So long, icky walk.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, we're running out of time. I got to let you go, but thanks for coming in tonight, and see you on the ice again, man.
You bet. Thank you. Give me a holler.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
That's a scary story, isn't it? I was giving him a hard time until I realized really what was going on in that situation, and it's tough. Have you ever been through the ice, Tom?
Yeah, I have. I fortunately, knock on wood, I've never had to look up at the hole, but I've gone through a few times, but I've always been there's always been bottom before I had to tread water. So that's you never know when it's going to happen, and you got to be prepared for it, but the best thing to do is don't go out on it,
Yeah.
So
I went through on purpose one time in 9 foot, and we were doing a video on ice safety, and I had life jackets on and people there with ropes and stuff. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing more scary than that. It just, even with ice spikes, it was hard to get out of the ice. So if you don't carry ice spikes, you guys highly recommend it. Hey, Tom, I'd like to keep you a few more minutes. I wanted to go through the types of blades on augers. If you guys are in the market for augers going forward, there's a lot of different ice blades that are out there, and it really is important that you recognize what they are. I want to show you some of the blade styles. The flat blades are the ones that just basically they're flat with a sharpened edge. Then you've got the curved blades, which is actually a big improvement. And then you've got the curved blade with the serrations. And then you got the chipper blades. And why they're important And Tom, I know you've probably worked with a lot of different blades yourself. The flat blades are the ones that are found typically on the hand augers or lower end augers. They're very inexpensive to make, easy to make. But for the flat blades, you've got to actually give downward pressure and cut. They're not going to be the fastest cutting, but they're decent blades. They're not bad blades, but they're not the highest performance ones. There's a number of companies that make them. Razor actually does as well, and they have them as their flat blades. But if you're looking for a little bit better performance, the curved blades, the ones that have a bend, and I got to see if I got the right photo here. That's the wrong one. The curved blades are the ones that actually have a bend in it. And these, you don't need to put as much downward pressure on. They cut extremely well. I've been using curved style blades for a number of years. The only knock that are about curved blades is that later in the season, if you have some of the grit, if you get the winds and things, especially if you're fishing areas like the Dakotas, or late in the season, you've got vehicle traffic dropping mud and stuff on there. Those curved blades, they can get a piece of sand or something along that, and they can knock that edge off. Tom, which style blades are you running on your augers?
I prefer the curved blades, day in and day out. I think that's your best bet. But you're absolutely right about that. Even when you get into lakes that have the flowages and stuff with a little bit dirtier water, where even at ice up, you could have had a situation where the water was turbid. I mean, those blades get beat up pretty fast, that's for sure. So you definitely, want to be mindful of how you're taking care of them and what you're drilling through. But the curved blades definitely get the nod from me most of the time.
Yeah. So, some of the blades, one of the advancements in the curved blades is they actually put serrations on them now. And the big advantage of the serrations is that when it does come in contact with some sort of debris in the ice, is that serration allows it to slide down the blade and then exit the curved, the cutting edge, which is really nice. The disadvantage of the curved blade, and I don't care if it's a serrated model or not, is they're not great at reopening holes. They'll work in things, but the chipper blade is a much better choice. It's a much heavier blade. You can see how thick it is and how aggressive those serrations are. And those are really good for reopening holes. So if you got a wheelhouse that you're going to be using a lot, where you're out there for a day or two, it freezes 4, 5, 6 inches, and then you got to recut that hole again. Those chipper blades are a great choice. You agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Down here we definitely don't deal with the amount of ice that you guys do up there. Fortunately, it actually makes life a lot easier drilling through 12 to 18 inches of ice instead of 36 to 40 inches. But there's definitely a time and a place for all of them, for sure.
Yeah. So, Kai, I want to run through a few more photos today, or a few more questions today. Do you have ones that you want to run through, or does anybody else have additional questions before we sneak out of here? Matt Stevens got a question. What's the run time for LiveScope with stock batteries? On the lead acid batteries, if you're running at 32 degrees, Matt, and you're running it with about 100% backlight, you're going to look at about 6 to 8 hours. And if you have the new lithium battery with the 16 amp hour, you're really going to look at somewhere between 10 and 12 hours, which is a good full day on the ice.
One little tip also, Steve, that I always like to remind people is, if you just turn that backlight down to 90%, that's gonna increase your runtime dramatically. The other thing is, when don't leave that thing running all the time. I use sleep mode quite a bit on that unit, and that also buys you a lot more time. In the sleep mode, it's all set to go. All you have to do is just hit the on button again, and that thing will come right back up working in the settings that you put it to sleep with, and that makes a big difference for me, for sure.
Awesome. Hey, I'm going to bring Troy back in real quick. He looks, I'm looking at him on the screen. He looks busy on there. Troy, have you had a ton of questions tonight?
Oh yeah, with some really good ones tonight.
Yeah, I was looking at, we're up around 200-300 comments that I thought was a ton. Was there a question or two that stood out tonight to you?
Well, so no one's ever asked me this, but what does a thermocline look like on LiveScope, or even can you even see it? And the answer is absolutely. You know, I'm down here in the Kansas City area where we get, 85-degree water in the summertime. It gets real nasty, and you get a really massive thermocline around 20, 25 feet. Yep. And it's a density change of the water, and that's what sonar reflects from, is a density change. So you're seeing the density change of that thermocline, and it shows up as a layer, just like you would expect. And I was answering somebody's question on that, and Philip, I think. And above the thermocline, you can see just fine. It's not like it's interference; it's just a layer of attenuation. So anything below that thermocline is harder to see. And a lot of times you'll see a big old school of bait fish or game fish right above that thermocline. They like to stay in that more higher oxygenated water there above that. So yeah, it definitely shows up on LiveScope.
So here's a comment for Tom as well, but you look at some of these LiveScope images and they're super clear backdrops with maybe a fish showing. Then you see other images where you've got more clutter in the background. If somebody's looking for maximum information, turning the gain up is obviously the best way to do it if you can put up with some of that background noise. But I think one of the keys too is to play with that color gain first. Troy, can you explain what color gain is and how it really can be best used for someone that's looking for a more detailed picture with their LiveScope?
Well, okay, so color gain, what it does is it highlights a week's. I mean, if you increase it above the default setting, it increases the color of the target. If it's a weak target, it'll go from a yellow to a red or whatever, and it just like saturates that color or that target. And it does absolutely makes a target appear like it's larger because you don't have the lighter colored, weaker signal portion of it around it. It's all highlighted as a brighter target. So I use that quite a bit. I use like a +3 clicks above the default setting on color gain. And that's just my own personal preference, but that works out really well.
Tom, what do you use with color gain? Do you leave it at default or do you play with that as well?
No, I'll play with it also. It once again, it depends, just like what Troy said, it depends where I'm at and what I'm doing. If I'm fishing open water, say the Great Lakes, where we have real clear water, low turbidity, in that situation, to increase my range just to see targets, I will increase the color gain. They'll just show up a little more vividly at a longer range. When I'm in water that's a little dirtier or I'm not looking out as far, I may turn it down a little bit, just because when you turn that color gain up, you're also going to pick up a lot more of the little particles and different things floating around in the water. So, but people want to see this perfect picture, this crystal clear picture. You have to remember that you're also reducing some of the information that you're picking up. When we're talking about the thermocline, it's the same thing. You're not going to be able to see some of those things as I shouldn't say clearly, but they're not going to show up as well as you reduce that color gain to get more of a clear picture. If that makes sense.
One of the first times I used LiveScope through the ice, I actually had the gain turned up fairly high, and a pike came in, and I said, wow, look at this pike. And my buddy who was fishing with me, he goes, how do you know it's a pike? I says, I can see the shape, I can see the fins, I can see the slope of the head, I can see everything. I mean, I knew it was a pike before it bit, which was pretty amazing. So that's awesome. Hey, we've got a winner tonight for our Garmin Striker 4, which is an awesome ice unit. It is super light. It's got flasher and traditional 2D sonar, but it's also got GPS. And our winner tonight is Jess Ritchie. Kai, I think that we're screwing up here. We're actually giving away the Razor 5 tonight. So we're going to be giving away, Jess, you've won a Razor Scout 5-inch that will get in the mail to you this week. So thanks for joining us. We do have one more Striker 4 we're going to be giving away next week. But so you guys tune in for that. But Jess, thanks for tuning in. Hey, Tom, I want to thank you for co-hosting tonight. I can't wait to talk to Danny tomorrow and see how things are going with him. And but thank you for stepping in and helping out tonight.
Yeah, no problem, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll be watching the Packers move ahead. You know, it hurts to say they had the
Super Bowl,
the number one spot. Yeah, you guys look tough this year. You look tough, and we'll figure out what the Vikings do with the new coach. I think that'll probably be announced tomorrow. I think. Yeah. And Troy, you've been to the Super Bowl with the Chiefs the last 2 years. You can share the wealth, maybe.
Yeah, it is what it is. I just it'd be a great thing to see. The Chiefs and the Packers in the Super Bowl a replay again. So that'd be something else.
That'd be awesome. Well, guys, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight, and Tom and Troy, thanks as well. We'll see you next week, Sunday afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.